I welcome you to today's conversation in management accounting. You're very much welcome in management accounting. You may be aware that you are presented with an assignment. Of course, that is just due a few days from now. The assignment has got 2 questions. I should be quick to indicate that the first part of the question is coming from this short-term decisions, And after that one, there is the second question, which is about discussing the concept of total quality management, including the main principles. And my area of interest is on the question number 3, actually, which is coming from activity-based costing. Okay, activity-based costing, ABC. So you're provided this question and the 2 types of product of model M and model 6. So you are given all this data, right? There is all the necessary data. I know this time around you don't yet know how to deal with this data. I'll show you how to play with it. So you're given this data, and from the data that you have been given, you're even given the annual sales and the sales price for these sales. You're given the annual sales and the sales price for these sales. And after the annual sales and the sales prices, you're given also the quantities of the sale orders that have been ordered. Then to cost the section for the direct costs. Now, the whole idea behind activity-based costing, it is to assess the cost of production, mainly the cost of production, by ensuring that the costs is linked to the activities, okay? All the activities taking place. So what we're going to do is the total cost that you're going to be given, it will be made up of the prime costs, the direct costs, and the overhead costs, which are the indirect costs. For example, here we have the overhead costs totaling to 328,600. So these total costs, overhead costs, they need to be allocated, okay, properly allocated to these, products that you are producing using the basis. And the basis of allocation that we are going to use for these is given. For example, for the setup cost, we use the number of setups. For material handling, we will use the number of batches. For special part handling, we are going to use what? Number of special parts. And for invoicing, we are still going to use the number of orders. For other overheads, we use direct labor, labor hours. This is the major thing that we are not supposed to do. Remember the total cost. Total cost is made up of what? Prime costs, which are all the direct costs. Direct labor costs, direct material costs. Plus overhead what? Overhead costs. When you add all these 2 together, you get what is known as what? You get the total cost. You have the total what? The total cost. So basically, this is what does happen. So what is it that you are going to do? So that's the area of concern. What is it that you are actually going to do? Total costs is given there, right? Okay. So now, after given all this data, the question is asking you to calculate the profit per unit for each model using ABC costing or activity-based costing. So finding the profit is not a problem. You and I know that the profit is always equal to the revenue, the total revenue minus the total cost. Now, I want you to pay particular attention. Total revenue is found by multiplying the price, the selling price that we already have in the question, times the units sold, the quantity sold, okay? That will give you as total revenue for each of the product. Then you should do less total cost. Now, I've said that this total cost is made up of what? It is made up of the prime costs plus the overhead what? The overhead costs. So the major thing is to find the total costs. Now, prime cost may not be very challenging, but to find overhead costing using activity-based costing. So in short, we are going to calculate for the total costs using activity-based costing. Once we find that total, we'll deduct it from the what? From the total revenue. Then we'll find the profit. Okay, we will find the profit. If you want to find the profit per unit, we can even divide ultimately by the number of units for that product that have been produced. That can still give us the profit per unit. So that's what we are going to do. So the major thing, the thrust of this conversation is to teach you how to find the total costs. Okay? The thrust of the conversation is teach you how to find the what? The total cost using activity-based costing. Then afterwards, we can now manage to tell which of the product they can do what? They can prioritize given on the analysis. The one that is cheaper, the one that is more profitable, that is it that we're going to, to prioritize. And the last part of the question is asking us to discuss the usefulness and criticisms of the ABC technique. That we will discuss in this conversation. So I'm going to get a similar example that is very, very similar to this. There, I will just teach you how to find the total costs. Total revenue is not a problem. I've told you that to find total revenue is the number of sales times the selling price. I mean, how many units have sold times the selling price. So it will give you the revenue. So that's not a problem. Okay, that is not a problem. It will give you the revenue. For example, for model 6, the 250 units of selling times the 8,000 units that were sold. So that can easily give you the revenue. But what I am interested in, what we are interested in is how to find the cost. So let's go and calculate the cost. Please pay particular attention to this one. I want you to be so attentive. Be so attentive. Here is an example that I am reading. Very similar. Now, pay attention to the way how we are calculating costs using activity-based costing. So this is our question that we are given. And so the question is reading. After attending a management accounting course on activity-based costing, ABC, you decide to experiment by applying the principles of ABC costing to the 4 products currently made and sold by 2 companies. 4 products I'm teaching you now. 4 of them. There we were just dealing with how many products? Only 2. But now we're dealing with 4. Then the details of the 4 products and relevant information is given in the period. And this is what is there. Pay attention to the information. They have given us the units produced. Okay. How many units have been what? Produced. Remember here, we are not asking about the profit. We are finding the cost. So we are given the units, okay, that are produced for all the products. Then the cost per unit for direct material for each of the product and for direct labor. This is making up what is known as the prime cost, because the prime cost is made up of direct material cost, direct labor cost, plus direct expenses. In this question, we don't have direct expenses, so we just have these direct costs. So when you add, for example, for product A, 40 plus 28, giving you 68, 68 kwacha is actually the cost price per unit. Of course, this is the prime costs in this case, per unit of product A. Prime costs, because prime cost is only for direct costs. Even here, you add that plus that being 71, that's the prime cost per unit. So if you want to know the actual cost, the actual prime cost, the number of units, which are 100, should be multiplied by 71. That will give you the actual costs, prime costs for product B. And for actual prime costs for product A in that similar manner, that times that as well gives us the actual prime cost for product C, and this and that for product D. So in an orderly manner. After we are given these costs now and the units, we have already found the prime costs, right? You've seen how the prime cost is. Then now we're given that there are machine hours that are allocated for each of these products. There is machine hours that we have been allocated. So the additional information is that the 4 products are similar, okay? They are usually produced in production runs of 20 units and sold in batches of what? 10. So they are sold in the batches of 10 units, okay? And they are produced in production runs. So that is what is very important. The production runs, they're how many? They are of 20 units and sold in the batches of 10 units. Now, the production overhead is currently absorbed using the machine hour rate. Remember, I told you our total cost is made up of prime cost plus overhead costs, right? Which are the indirect costs. Put together, they make up the overhead cost. So we are told that the prime cost or the overhead cost is actually right now absorbed using the machine hour rate. And then the total production overhead for the period has been analyzed. This is the total production overhead. Okay. So you are, in short, you have been given the total production overhead. This is the overhead. The overhead has been broken down. Observe the way how it has been broken down. The machining department costs and everything is giving us 10,430. The setup cost, this is an overhead, or the total indirect cost for setup cost is 5,250. And 3,600 for stores receiving, and material handling giving us that these, they make up the total overhead cost. Now, this is the overhead cost that has not yet been allocated to those specific products. Get it? These are not according to the specific products. No, they're just overheads. But we have to make sure that we reallocate them to the specific products, product A, B, C, and D. So now, what basis are we going to use to allocate these overheads? The prime cost we have already found, but for us to find the total cost, we need to allocate these overheads, okay, the indirect costs, so that we can now add properly. See what happens. See what is happening now. We are given the basis of allocation, which is called now the cost drivers. Here are the cost drivers. You use the following drivers. When allocating the setup cost, you should use the number of what? Production runs. Okay? Use the number of production runs that are there. Each product has got the number of production runs, by the way. So it is actually that the number of production runs that will be used to allocate, the setup cost. I will show you how that is done. Then similarly for the stores and receiving, you should use the requisition rates. So you have to know the number of requisitions for each of these products, for A, B, and C and D. Okay, and then allocate the store's requisition, this amount, according to the number of requisition per product. if you followed nicely, this is what you also did under cost accounting. Yeah. When you are doing overhead costing, when you are just doing the reallocation. But this time around, the reallocation that we are doing is not really highly traditional. See what we are doing. So mainly these are the basis, the cost drivers that you're going to use to reallocate, to allocate these or to break down these, overhead costs according to the products. The information is given to us that the number of requisition raised on the stores was what? 20 for each product, which simply means when you are allocating the cost which should be allocated by the number of requisitions, which is the stores, right? Stores receiving, the total cost is what for stores is 3,600. When you're allocating that, you should use the number of what? Requisitions. Now we are told that each product A, B, C, and D, they all have 20 stores, 20 requisitions, 20 requisition and 20 what? Requisitions. So you use this data. Don't worry, I will show how we use that data. So you should know how many number of requisitions are there for each of the product. Even for this one, the number of production runs, you should know how many they are for each product. The number of orders executed for each product, you should know. Let's go ahead and look at the other information. It says that the number of orders executed are how many? Was 42. The number of orders executed was 42. Now, each order being for a batch of what? 10, okay, of a product. So to find the actual number of orders that were done, have to know that in total there were 42, but each of them was made up of what? How many batches? A batch was made up of 10. So you have 10 units. You have to divide, for example, the first product, you have how many units produced? 120. So 120 divided by 10, it will give you 12 what? 12 like orders. So you have to understand the number of orders. In some questions, they can even give you the actual number of orders for each product. Then it will be easier that way. Yeah. But this one you have to calculate, and I'll show you how we calculate for that. What are we expected of doing now? We are required to calculate the total cost for each product using traditional approach if all overheads are absorbed using the machine hour basis. So this one is for using traditional approach, but the B one is the one that I'm interested in for using calculating the total cost using activity-based costing. First of all, let me run you through how to go through the traditional one. It's easier, then we can go now to the ABC, the ABC cost. For the traditional ones, you know that for you to get the total cost, the traditional total cost is made up of prime costs. It's just the prime cost, plus the overhead cost. And all the total overhead cost is just absorbed using one basis. And in this case, you're using the machine hours. It's not like under activity-based costing where you have all these bases to allocate those overheads. But under traditional costing, you just use one basis, the machine hours. So let me show you how to do using machine hours and find the total cost. So the first thing that you have to do is to calculate the total number of hours. Remember, to find the overhead, like the overhead absorption rate, you just have to say the fixed overhead, the overheads themselves, divided by, in this case, is total number of hours. You're using the number of hours. That's what they say. So using the total number of what? Number of hours. You get the point. Total overhead cost divided by the number of hours. So you add all the overheads together. Don't break them down. Add them together and divide by the total number of what? Hours. I'm interested in knowing how to do the total number of hours. Look at the way how you do total number of hours so that you don't start panicking on how to do the total number of hours. The question is very clear. Look at what it says. it said that for product A, the total number of hours per unit, each unit was taking what? 4 hours. So it is 4 hours times 120 plus 3 hours times 100, 2 hours times 80, 3 hours times 120. You multiply these and then add the answers that you find today. This will give you the total number of hours to produce all the 4 products. So once you find the total number of hours in this case, since you're using the hour rate, the absorption rate, you're using the hour rate, the machine hour rate, you divide the total overhead costs divided by the total number of hours, in this case for machines. If they had said labor hours, that like they are currently allocating these using labor hours, you could have been given the labor hours as well. So you could have used the labor hours, the number of labor hours times the units, number of labor hours times the units, add them together, it would give you the total number of hours. So those hours, they should be entered into the total overhead cost. And the total overhead cost, I've told you, is this one. Add all these, add them together. They will give you the total overheads. They'll give you the total overhead. When these have given you the total overhead, what happens? You divide the number of hours, the total number of hours into the what? Into the overhead. The total number of hours into the overhead. Then we have found that the rate is actually 20 kwacha per machine hour. That is the rate that is being used, at which our overheads are being absorbed, okay? All the overheads, they're just being absorbed at 20 kwacha per what? Per hour. So to find the total overhead that went for each product, you just multiply 20 times the number of hours, machine hours for that product. So it's the number of hours times 20 kwacha, which is the rate. So in this case, if you want to find the overhead costs for this product using traditional costing, number of hours, 4 times 20, right? That is for product A. If you want to find the cost per unit here, for B, you say 3 times 20 again. 2 times 20, 3 times 20. These will give you the overhead per unit, the total overhead per unit. So these, I've said that these are prime costs per unit, right? Then the total overhead per unit is found by saying, in this case, 20 times 4, this will be 80 here. 20 times this will be 60 here. For the overhead per unit, this will be 40, and this will be 60 again. These are the overheads per unit. So you add all these, they will give you total cost per what? When you add these, they can give you total cost per unit, right? Add, they give you total cost per unit. So if you want to find the actual cost, not total cost per unit, you multiply this amount times the number of units now that have been produced, okay, per each product. These are total cost per unit. Multiply them by the number of the units that have been produced by each of the products. And that will actually give you what? That will give you the actual what? The actual total costs. So this is what I was trying to communicate to you. I said that the prime costs are already given in the question. Then the overheads, I've told you how we have come up with this. It's the number of hours times the rate that we are using. And once you add, you have this, then multiply by the number of outputs. It will give you the total cost. This is the total cost using the traditional costing. That was about using the traditional costing. Very easy to find the total cost if you're using the traditional costing. But our area of interest is not really the traditional costing. We are interested in the ABC costing. So see how we do it using ABC costing. I've told you that the prime cost is not a problem. It's easier to find, but we are interested very much. ABC is for allocating the overheads mainly. So see what we are doing. First of all, you list all the overheads, the way how they are. List the overheads. For machining department was that, For setups, for stores, receiving, just list all the overheads as broken down. Someone is asking, where are we finding those? We are given these overheads in the question. These overheads, these are they that I'm saying you list them down first. Okay. These are they, just list them down. And once you present them down like that, this is what you do. Okay. This is what you do. You have to indicate also the cost driver, and the cost drivers are given in the question. In this case, these are the cost drivers. Then this is a cost driver transaction. Now, cost driver transaction is found by asking the total number of those drivers for all the products. If you're using the machine hours, for the first one, machining department, we are using machine hours. So since you are using machine hours as a cost driver, you ask yourself, how many machine hours are there for all the products? We calculated and totaled them to 1,300. But what about production runs? How many are they per each product? To find the number of production runs, we are told that the production runs were being produced in the batch of 20. Okay, 20 units. So you add all the units for all the products, okay? For product A is 120, plus for product B, the units that were produced, plus for product C and plus for product D, you get 420 units, total units that were produced. So if you want the setups, you are told that the setups were per 20 units. So divide this by 20, okay? 42 divided by 20, that gives us exactly 21 setups. So that's how we found the 21 setups here. Okay. Why? Because the question gave us that we are finding the total. Okay. If it wanted, some questions can give you exactly like each product, the production runs, they can give you that production runs here. Maybe there are 5. Here there are 6. You add them together in this case to get this cost driver transaction total. Then for the number of requisitions, what does it say? What does the question say? Okay, let's go back to the question a bit so that you know how many total number of requisitions are there. It's here. Look at this nicely. I'll underline, you get what the question is saying about the number of requisitions. It is saying that the number of requisitions raised on the stores was what? 20 for each product. So how many products do we have? There are 4 products. So it's 4 times 20. But we know that each product, one product was costing 20. So, but in total, we have 80 of them, the requisitions. So I have to indicate 8. For the number of orders executed, we are told that there were 42 in total. And they are being of the batch of what? 10 each. This is very important, and we will need this. See how we're using this. So that's how we found this 8 for the number of requisition. For production runs here, total and quality, they have said you're using production runs as well. So they are still the same. But the number of orders executed, there are 42. But if you are not given that there are 42, it's simple. They have already told us that they were producing the batch of 10 units. So just divide the total units that are there. They are 420 divided by 10, giving you 42 what? 42 orders. The cost driver transactions have been found, but let's find the cost per unit. This is now where it becomes very important. The cost per unit of this, you just divide this into that, like the fixed cost divided by the cost driver transaction. Cost driver transaction. So for setup, you have 5250 divided by the number of, I would say the production runs in total. There are 21. Giving us the cost per unit of what? 250. You do the same for stores receiving 3,600 divided by 8, giving us this. These will give you the cost per unit. So once we do all these calculations, then we are about to finish. We're about to get the final answer. Look at the way how we get now the answer. How can we allocate using this information? Since we are going to be using these costs, right, to allocate these overheads. So first of all, we're going to bring down the, since we want the total cost, we're going to bring down the prime costs. How do you find the prime cost? This is what I'm just from telling you. Is prime cost, the total cost is made up of prime costs plus what? Plus overheads. All these are overhead costs. But here, unlike in the, you saw what happened under traditional costing. These overheads, we just combined them together. But this time around, we have broken them down and see what is happening. How were we finding these prime costs? It was very easy, right? Very easy. How do you allocate for the prime cost? It's just by totaling up all the prime costs that you have times the number of units. Simple. It will give us that total up the prime cost times the number of units. Let me show you how that is done. Okay, let me show you. Have you seen the prime cost that we have here? What's the prime cost? Sorry, the prime cost is this is the total prime cost for product A, for example. You know, you say 40 plus 60 or plus 28, giving us 68. So this 68 per unit times the number of units produced, there were 120. So 68 times 120. It is giving us 8,160. This is the total prime cost for product what? A. Let me also do one for product B so that you understand. For product B as well, you have to add. Similar manner, get to add 50 plus 21, giving you 71. 71 times the number of units produced. There were 100 for product B, giving you 7,100. That will be the total prime cost for product B. You do the same for C. 30 plus 14 times the number of units produced, there were 80. That will give you the number of what? The total prime cost. And the 60 plus 21 giving us 81 times 120, the number of what? The prime cost. So 81 times 120, the number of units, giving us 9,700 and what? 20. These are the total prime costs for each of the products, and I've shown you how we find them. My area of interest is how to find these other overheads. So the prime costs you've seen, I've explained where these came from. These prime costs, this is where they came from and how we're finding them. But how do we set up? How do you find the total cost that goes for the setup? This is using activity-based costing. So now, listen carefully. For setup, how much will you go for setup? That's your question. How much will you go for setup? You have to go back now to check the cost per unit of a setup and how many setups were there for each product. The cost per unit for a setup is how many? Setups is here. It's 250, right? We have calculated 250. This to be multiplied by the number of setups, okay? The number of setups, the number of setups. Now, for the number of setups, you need to use the production runs. What is the total number of production runs per what? Per product. We are told that the number of units produced for product A is 120, right? 120 units. These are they for product A. Divide this by 20. Because you're told that one production run is made up of how many batch units? 20 units. That's what the question says. So divide by the number of units That gives us what? 6. That gives us 6. Pay attention nicely. That gives us 6. So you say we are allocating for this setup cost. See how we are doing it. We are saying 120 divided by 20 giving us 6. 6 times this cost per unit 250. Okay. 6 times 250 giving us 1,000 what? 500. 1,500. That is for setup. That's how we find for setup. Then for product A, I've just done for product A. We can do the same for product B as well. For product B, you have to get how many units are there. There are 100. Divided by how many units per batch? There should be 20 units. That's what the question says. So say 100 divided by the number of units are how many? There are 20. So that will give us 5. 5 times 250. These units, 250. Giving us 1,200 and what? And 50 for product B. You do the same for product C, you know. It will be 80 divided by 20, giving you 4. 4 times 250, I think this should give you 1,000. So basically, you continue to do the same even for the last one, the D one. You say 120 divided by 20, giving you 66 times 250. It will give you this 1,500. That's how they were finding this cost for stores. Okay, the cost for stores. Here is the cost for stores. This is how all this, you know, the setup costs. This is how the setup cost was gotten. I have explained. It was the 250 per unit that was found times the number of production run per product, per each product. And how did you find it? It was the number of units produced divided by the number of units that are needed to make a one production run. So it was for product A, for example, 120 units divided by 20. Yeah. So basically, that is what is there. Is there any question? Okay. Let's go ahead and do for the stores. Let me do the stores. Okay. Let me do for the stores. What about for the stores? You have to go back and check the driver, the cost driver again. So the cost driver is always very important. The cost driver for the stores is the number of requisitions. So you have to ask yourself, how many number of requisitions were made per product in each product? So we are told that in the question, the number of requisitions were how many per product? It was fixed at 20 per product, right? Let me read that part for you so that you are not confused. The number of requisition per product. How many number of requisitions do we have per product? Okay. The number of product requisition per product are 20 for each product. So it is about 20 times that cost per unit. It will give you the costs that you need to allocate towards the same. So in this case, it's 20 for each. So it is 20 times the cost per unit is 45. That's what we have found. Don't know where that 45 is coming from. Under the number of requisitions here, we found 45. 45 times 20. So it will be fixed at 900 throughout. So it's the 900 for each product. That's why you find that it will be 900 throughout. So we have allocated how many costs? I've allocated all these. Yeah, we have allocated all these. Now we have remained with the inspection and quality, where you're using the production runs, and of which for production runs, we have said that it is 20 units. Okay, to enter into what? The 20 units are supposed to enter into the total units produced. That will give us the total production runs per what? Per product. Then times, in this case, times 100. Times 100 for inspection here. The cost is 100. So you do that. So for the first one, for the first product, for example, product A, has how many units produced? 120 units produced divided by 20, giving you 6. 6 times 100. It will give you 600. Then for product B, you say 100 units that were produced divided by 20 units. That will give you the number of production runs for product B times the cost per production unit, which is 100. It will give us that. And again, you do the same for actually C, where you say 80 units were produced divided by 20, giving us 4. 4 times what? 4 times the same 100, giving us 400. So that's how you would allocate for inspection. Let me just show you that quickly so that you are not confused. Where you were doing for 900, this is what I said, where we're saying 45, okay, 45 times, 20 requisition. Since you are using the number of requisition for inspection, I've told you it's 6 times that 100, 600, okay, 100 divided by 20, which is 5 times 100, 500, that we found. 80 divided by 20 times 100 gave us what? 400 here and 600 at last. So we have allocated, I've done the allocation for setups, for prime costs, for inspection. Let's do for handling costs. You can do now for the handling cost. So I'm showing you how to allocate these using ABC costing. Very easy. Let's just go back a bit to the driver for handling costs. Be reliably informed that the driver for the handling cost is what? It's 110. It's the number of orders. And the total cost the cost per unit is 110. The number of orders executed are 42 in total. So to make one, you just divide this, because you're told that they are being made in the batches of 10. So you say the units, the number of units that you have for product A is 120. 120 divided by 10, giving us 12. Then 12 times 110. Okay, that's how you find what you put for product A under the material handling. Then for B as well, you go to the units that are produced for B with 100 divided by 10, giving us 10 times, this 110, the same 110, which is the cost per unit. That gives us the value. And for C again, we had 80 units produced divided by 10, that's 8 times 110. So everything, once you do all these calculations, it will give us all these values here that you're seeing. Okay, for material handling. That's how you get this list for material handling. What about for machining department? Machining what department? This is very important as well. We are interested in knowing the number of machine hours per each department. Okay, per each department times the cost per machine hour. The cost per machine hour is 8 kwacha. It is 8 kwacha what? 20, isn't it? Yeah, it's 8 kwacha. 8 kwacha 20 way. So now, before you multiply by that, because we want to know the number of hours per product for each product. Okay. So if you want to know the number of hours per product, you have to go back to the data and see how many hours are allocated for each product and multiply by the number of units. So for product A, it is 4 hours per unit. We want to know the number of hours. 4 hours per unit multiplied by 120. It will give us the total number of hours. 120 times 4, giving us 400 and what? 80. Okay, for product A. For product B, is 3 times what? 3 times 100. That gives us 300 for product B. We want to know the number of hours for each product. 2 times 80, that's giving us 160. 160. And for C again, it will be 3 times 120, giving us 360. These are number of hours that we are finding, isn't it? For each product. Then we have to multiply them by the cost per unit, which is, in this case, 8 kwacha. 8 kwacha 20. Okay. Everywhere I will be multiplying by the same 8 kwacha times 20, 8 kwacha times 20, 8 kwacha times 20. So let's say 8.20 times 480, giving us 3,936 for the first one. The second one, 8.20 times 300, giving us 2,460. The next one is 160 times 8 quotient 20, giving us 1,312. You do the same for the last one, 360 times 8,020, giving us 2,952 as a cost that will go for that machining department. So basically, this is how we find that cost. This is the cost. These are the exact values that we are finding here. Okay. They are the same values that you were finding. Right? Is there any question from anyone? Is there any question? Any question from anyone? So now, once we have done the cost for the machining department, very, very easy. You would have allocated all the overheads costs using activity-based costing. Then add to the prime cost, add everything. In short, this is the total cost. This is just total cost, total cost. If you want total cost per unit, divide by the number of, divide by the number of what? By the number of units that have been produced. For product A is 120, for product B you said is 100, here is 80, there is what? There is 120 again. Divide into that, then that will give you the total cost per unit. But since we just wanted the total cost, that's how you find the total cost, using activity-based costing. So now, maybe the question that we should ask ourselves is that, what are some of the weaknesses or the advantages of ABC costing? The good part. Activity-based costing provides a more accurate method of costing of products and services, as we have just seen. And again, the other advantage is that it allows for a better and a more comprehensive understanding of overheads and what causes those same overheads. ABC costing makes it costly. It makes costly and non-value adding activities more visible, so allowing the managers to focus on these areas to reduce and eliminate them. Because if you're just getting the overheads as a total under traditional costing, the way how you did, it's difficult to see which one is just incurring the total cost. So this way is better to see. Actually, activity-based costing supports other management techniques such as continuous improvement, scorecards, and performance management. However, there are some criticisms about this same ABC costing. The disadvantages of activity-based costing is that it can be difficult and time-consuming to collect the data about activities and cost drivers. It can be difficult and time-consuming to collect this data. And again, it can be costly to implement and run and manage the ABC system. It may be costly. Okay.
Even in ABC costing, that's the other disadvantage. Some overhead costs are difficult to assign to products and to customers. So these costs still have to be arbitrarily applied to products and to customers.